class. Welcome to World History 101. My name is Professor Rebecca Howard. Today's lecture is going to cover Africa from the years 1500 BCE to around 500 CE. And we will also begin an ongoing topic in this course about the role of environment in history. Today I will introduce what is known as the resource curse and want you to begin thinking about how environment impacts history. Geography is the mother of all history. Nowhere in the world is this more profoundly illustrated than in Africa. One of the most powerful forces in African experience is the African environment. According to Ali A. Mazrui, an African scholar who created the African series The African, Africa has been the first habitat of man, but is the last to become truly livable. Africa is a continent with a wide variety of environments, including diverse civilizations such as Egypt, Carthage, and Kush. Africa is the second largest continent in the world. Today we are going to discuss the diverse environments in Africa and how humans adapted to these environments. The first humans appeared in the Great Rift Valley, a deep gash in the Earth's crust that runs to the floor of the Red Sea and across the eastern Africa. People moved out from this area to the world's first migration, adapting to vast different environments they encountered. They developed technologies that helped them survive in different environments. As an example, spears were first created out of sticks, and then they were created out of stone, and lastly, they were created out of iron. Africa's earliest people were hunter-gatherers who roamed from place to place looking for food. Even today, some of the hunter-gatherer communities still exist. For example, the Bamunti of the rainforests in the Congo and the San of the Kalahari Desert. The San travel in small bands of few related families. The men hunt with spears and bows and arrows, and the women and children gather roots and berries. These communities understand their environment and resources well. Environments that support a lot of animals' lives were eventually domesticated and raised for food. Pastoralists and herders kept sheep, cattle, and goats. Similar to the hunter-gatherers, they were nomads, traveling from region to region, looking for good pastures and water sources for themselves and their animals. Today, there are still pastoralists and herders in Africa. One of these groups, called the Mazi, which are located in Tanzania and Kenya, their wealth is measured by the size of their herds. Although most Africans still continue to hunt for food, many of them eventually learned how to grow their own food rather than gather what grew from the wild. Many experts believe agriculture began around 10,000 BCE in Africa. Some interesting environmental factors which made this possible, around 8,000 BCE to around 4,000 BCE, the Sahara Desert began receiving increased rainfall that turned these regions into savanna. However, around 4000 BC, it began drying up again. To survive this drying up, many early farmers moved east into the Nile Valley in South and West Africa. Many settled on the savannas, which was the best agriculture land. Some people even farmed in some parts of the outer rainforest. Agriculture dramatically changed how people lived. Instead of constantly resettling communities, they were able to settle in one location where they built permanent homes. This increased lifespan and health because people had more food to eat. So communities expanded. New activities were also added to these communities, such as metalwork, pottery, and jewelry making. In these new complex settlements, communities became larger and required more regulation than the smaller nomadic communities. New types of governing bodies began to emerge. Some communities had village chiefs, while others had village councils. As their settlements grew, many groups began conquering weaker settlements and creating centralized power. Over time, some of these grew into great kingdoms. All of these new African cultures shared some common elements. They often had strong ties to the family that also included the extended family. Ties often expanded to the clan that often had common ancestors. Like all cultures, they also developed varying belief systems that help them understand their world. Most of these culture beliefs in one creator, most of these cultures believed in one creator or God. Many of these cultures also included elements of animism that believes in numerous spirits that play a role in day-to-day life. These They believed in these spirits were present in animals and plants and other natural forces. Also, some believed these spirits uh, um, that played a part in their daily lives were dead ancestors. Although all of these African societies had a language, most of them were not written down, so stories and history was passed down orally through storytelling called griots. Before we move on to societies in West Africa and East African trade, I think it would be a good idea to discuss some of the geological and environments of the African continent itself. Africa is the second largest continent in the world. It stretches from east to west at 4,600 miles and from north to south at 5,000 miles, which is a total of 11.7 million square miles and occupies 1/5 of the Earth's land surface. The continent has a very narrow coastline, though. Waterfalls and rapids often form as river drops down the coast of the plateau, making navigation nearly impossible from coast. Africa's coastline has few harbors and ports. Their coastline is actually shorter than that of Europe's, even though it is one third of Africa's size. Some of Africa suffers from constant drought, whereas other locations receive 400 inches of rainfall a year. Vegetation ranges from dense green forests and, and then all the way to sand dunes and rocky wastes. Each environment in Africa provides its own challenge to people and wildlife. Deserts make up 40% of the continent. The environments are unlivable, with temperatures that often reach 136 degrees Fahrenheit. The largest deserts are the Sahara in the north and the Kalahari in the south. The Sahara Desert is so large it spans an area roughly the size of the United States. Another environment that is partially uninhabitable is the rainforest. Although very different than the desert, it is an environment that humans cannot survive. Rainforests cover around 5% of the continent and stretch about half the middle of Africa. The rainforest is hot and humid and receives an enormous amount of rain. Many trees in the rainforest reach 150 feet tall and lying together develop a canopy that prevents sunlight from reaching the ground. This is why most of the rainforests aren't there aren't many small plants in the bottom of the ground, unlike what is often portrayed in movies and television, that they're very habitable jungles with lots of plants, but they're not. The northern coast and the African tip are habitable environments. They have welcoming climates and fertile soil. Summers are sunny and dry and hot, and winters are mild. Rainfall is moderate in these regions. These areas are so fertile that they are densely populated with farmers and herders. The largest number of people in Africa, however, live on the savannas or grassy plains. Savannas cover around 40% of the continent. Dry season and rain season often alternate throughout the year. Major crops in these regions are rice, millet, and maize. Africa's savanna also include mountains areas and swampy tropics, as well as the plains that we are most familiar with when we think of the savanna. The land on the edge of the desert is undergoing a steady process of desertification and drying the soil. The coastline between savanna and desert is known as the Sahel, which means coastline in Arabic. A major environmental factor in these regions that impact history and the present is the problem of droughts. Drought causes loss of agriculture and animals, create famine, cost human lives. Now that I gave you an introduction to the early African civilizations, including religion, as well as spent a considerable amount of time discussing diverse African environments, what role do you think environment has played in African civilizations and the way the world interacts with Africa? Some people have said that Africa has a resource curse due to the vast variety of resources that other nations and empires have conquered solely to exploit. Also, I want you to think of various environmental factors that impact other areas around the world throughout history. Africa is the world's richest continent, has vast wealth of natural resources, ranging from precious stones such as gold and diamonds to fossil fuels. The tropical climates, beautiful and diverse wildlife, and sandy beaches are also quite attractive to tourists. From these, the total drivable revenue has the potential to completely transform African economies. But then why is Africa stuck in a ongoing system of war and poverty instead of prosperity? This leaves us wondering to the question, what is a resource curse? Um, by definition, the resource curse refers to countries with numerous natural resources tending to underdeveloped, political unstable, with a higher level of poverty compared to nations with lesser or not no such resources. According to Michael T. Clare, a Peace World Security Studies professor at Hampshire College, Massachusetts, and also author of Resource Wars and Blood Oil, is quoted as saying, "The resource curse to me applies specifically to poor countries that don't have a lot of sources of wealth to begin with. Then there is a discovery of major resources, oil or copper, gold, that suddenly becomes a major source of wealth for that country. A symptom of the resource curse in Africa. This curse is avoidable, as it does not seem to occur in every resourceful country in the world, but in Africa it seems to be unavoidable. In this way, in his view, it is this resource curse that has led to the rise of tyrannical governments clinging onto power for decades as to control these resources. Clare states, theoretically, the development of that resource could produce great wealth for the nation, but historically it leads to concentration of wealth in the hands of a few, those who monopolize the collection of rents and mining of the drilling of oil, and the exclusion of a majority of any benefit. In retaliation, armed rebels, mainly from minority individuals who feel excluded from the benefits, rise and stage bloody conflicts. This is big gain control for resources. For instance, Dr. Congo has witnessed some of the bloodiest conflicts, resulting in death of more than 6 million people in less than 3 decades. This country has some of the largest deposits of gold, diamond, and copper, and other precious minerals in Africa. In some cases, the armed rebels claim ownership of the land in which the resources lie, especially in oil-rich fields. The rebels are funded by illegal sale of these minerals or by corrupt government officials. The many innocent civilians caught in the crossfire end up losing their land, loved ones, and even their own lives. So, I've given you an introduction to early African history and also the resource curse and also African environment on the continent. And as we continue to progress throughout this course, we will cover how environment impacts history at different times. But always keep it in your mind and think about it for future discussions. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.